Okay, it is Tuesday, May the 26th. It is week number 3 of Introduction to Criminal Law. I was looking at something while I was talking, that's why I hesitated with you. But yeah, Introduction to Criminal Law. And at the end of this week, we'll be at the halfway point. And also, you should be aware that this week, one of the assignments will be your what I consider your midterm exam based upon the quizzes, the practice quizzes we've done and the practicing things that we've done to help you to get ready for this test that will be coming up. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so you can see here we're at week 3. Week 3. Okay. All right. So now let's take a look at well, before we get to the announcement, let's look at the course calendar first. Okay. Course calendar, you see where we are here. Of course, though, your initial post is due tonight. What type of homicide is this? It's due tonight at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then your reply post is due the 30th. And then the last day of the month, your quiz, and then your written assignment on spousal rape, which we're going to talk about. By the way, I will be grading this evening your week 1 assignment. So week 2, I'll have that done hopefully by the end of the week that you had to do. But week 1's assignment, I will have it done tonight after I finish with you guys. Okay, and you can see that at the end of this week, starting next week, we'll have just 3 more sessions that'll be left, and that the course ends on the 19th, not the 20th, not the 21st. 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. If you get an assignment in at 12 midnight and it's going to show the 20th, I can't give it to you. It's a violation of the school policy, and I will not violate the school rules. Okay, so be clear on that. Now let's go back to looking at what I was going to say about week 3. So we continue when we finish with week 3, which will be the 31st. So starting on the 1st, which will be the start of week 4, you should be aware of what I'm about to say. If you have not turned in weeks 1, 2, or 3, or made special arrangements with me, then I will tell you right now that you will not be able to turn them in. Now they're already late. Week 1, if you haven't done week 1, which I'll be grading, then it's already over 7 days late. So there's a possibility you can get zeros, but usually I give some points. Week 2's assignment, of course, was due the 24th, which is just a couple of days ago. So at this point, you would be, at this point, 20% off. And then tomorrow, 30% off. And then 40% off. And then 50% off. See, so by Friday, you'll be really at fail. So the point of the matter is that starting with the 1st, I will not accept those assignments at all. There have been students that tried to turn them in, whether it's the quiz or anything. Your actual looking at the video, is going to get you a 0 anyway, because it's going to zero out, because you will have passed the period of time that you can get points that are for being able to get the video. Okay, so anyway, just want to remind you of that. Okay, let's close this down. And let's go to the course homepage again. Here we go. Okay, and so now let's look at where we are this week. So last week we studied crimes against property. So this week we're dealing with crimes against persons, and you had chapters 4, 5, and 6 of your textbook. And to complete the activities that I'm going to go over: homicide, battery, domestic violence, sexual assault crimes, and then the key terms for practice, special circumstances, homicide, classification, and then finally the practice quiz, all important. Be sure to participate in the discussion assignment. What type of homicide is this? Your initial post again is due tonight at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard. Your reply post is due Saturday at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard. Finally, complete the written assignment, spousal rape, which I'll go over in just a few minutes, and of course the quiz, which is of course timed. Again, reminding you that the quiz encompasses weeks 1, weeks 2, and weeks 3 materials. Okay, and so then you know what my motto is: adversity is a springboard to success. So now let's go take a look at the specifics of the assignments. Discussion post: what type of homicide? You use this scenario up here, Rick and James, which is, I always thought it was kind of funny when they put this together, because there was a artist, Rick James, years ago. Some of you may have known of his name, but I had some personal encounters with him because I was representing entertainers and clubs at that time. So I met him years ago. So anyway, Rick and James are involved in this issue, and you're going to look at the scenario, and then you're going to answer the initial post. As the investigating officer, what criminal charge would you recommend against James? Would it be first-degree murder, involuntary manslaughter, or voluntary manslaughter? Explain which criminal law is most applicable and why. And I know some of you are going to apply the jurisdictions that you're in, and if you say that, that's fine. But be aware that the way that we're going to go over this tonight is generally not any specific jurisdiction. Then your reply post, pick one that contrasts with yours, okay, and deal with it from that point. Of course, you know that one is due Saturday. And then the written assignment, spousal rape. So this, as you can see, is a two-part assignment. You must do both parts, and you must follow the instructions in the rubric, which match up with what I'm going to go over now. So you're going to look at this scenario and write a short paper addressing these issues. And the short paper is a minimum of 2 pages. Some people just will stop there and they'll say, write a short paper. Well, to complete this assignment, a short paper means a minimum of 2 pages, double space. Okay, not counting the reference page, not counting the cover sheet, with citations in the body throughout the paper and references at the end. I do encourage you to stay away from using the textbook. I encourage you because the idea is to get you more proficient with research. So you're going to list the elements and how they would have been met. Explain what types of crimes are committed. Explain why the initial responding officer mishandled the case the first time, if so. And it says if you use your textbook or outside source to research the elements, include a reference page. Don't forget that if. Forget that if. Forget it. Act like it's not even there. You're going to use sources other than your textbook, or you're going to use outside sources for research, and there are plenty you can find in the Library and Learning Center on these issues. And you're going to make sure it's done APA style, run the papers through Grammarly, and citations, not just one, but remember, as I said before, citations should match what's on your reference page. So if you have 4 references and 1 citation, there's something wrong. Now, and you shouldn't have just one source that you use throughout your paper. You guys got to not stop at one source. At least, I would say at least 2 sources. 3 is really optimal and very good. The key thing that you're doing, guys, keep remembering, is you're not just completing an assignment, but you're gaining knowledge about the issues that are involved in the written assignment. And that's what my goal is for you, is to make sure you do that. Be sure to cite the sources using proper APA citations and all the other requirements. Again, run your papers through Grammarly. All right, now make sure you separate this part 1 from part 2. Now, I don't want you to do attempt 1, attempt 2. I want you to either attach it as a second document, which is easily done, or I dare say as a zip, which is not one of my favorites because it slows me down in grading it. But if you do it, that's okay, if that's the only way you know how to do it. But the key thing is I got to make sure that you have both parts, okay? Now, with the interview, consider what type of interview questions you would ask the victim to determine what laws have been violated. And here is the scenario right here that you're going to use for the interview. So not using this, but using this scenario. So address the following in a minimum of 1-page paper. Explain how you will approach the interview. All right. And then what sensitive questions will you ask in order to determine the nature of what happened? Remember, you have a resource of guides to help you for these assignments. There's all kind of resources that are available to help you with the online library and so forth. Now, when you do this one right here, you should, if you use questions from a source that you find, cite those sources. If not, questions that you've made up or you yourself have come up with, you don't have to do that. But make sure that you understand that this is a 1-page document satisfying both parts. Finally, the rubric tells you the date and elaborates again on what I just said a few minutes ago. For examine the type of crimes. And then the second part is conducting the interview. Okay. Notice this is 2 pages and this is 1 page. double space, and then your spelling and grammar, and then the APA. Questions about the written assignment, spousal rape for this week? Any? Yes. Yes. All written assignments are in APA format. Yes. Of course, unless it's a chart or something like that, then it's different. But notice what this says. This says, complete this part of the assignment addressing the following one page. Explain how you'll approach the interview. So that's APA. And then I had previously said that the first part was APA. It says it actually in the assignment as well as in the rubric. So both parts are. Okay. I always remind students, please do this for me and for yourself. Read the requirements, read them again, and read them again. And sometimes you have to 3 times before you actually do the assignment to make sure that you get this right. So, any other questions? Okay. All right. That was a legitimate question because sometimes people think that the interview doesn't have to be APA because it didn't necessarily say in here. But the answer is yes, both parts should be APA. Remember I said if you use sources to come up with your questions, you're going to cite those sources. All right. So everybody's all good with that? Let's go back. And let's see the last thing you got to do, and that's your quiz. It's going to be 30 minutes. Okay, don't ask me how many questions. I cannot tell you, but think about the standard quizzes that you've taken with these courses. If it says 30 minutes, generally, how many questions does that mean? Anybody have a guess? Neither of you, I don't think, are right. But the point of the matter is that, as a matter of fact, I'm getting ready to stop sharing for a minute, and I'm going to look at this. Can you see what I'm looking at? Can any of you see what I'm looking at? Type in the chat box. Can you tell me what you look at now, what you see now if you look at the screen? You see anything? You just see me. You didn't see what I was looking at? Okay. Okay. I didn't think so. Give me a minute. There's a reason why I did that. me go back. Give me a minute. Okay. So anyway, back to the point of dealing with Module 3 and the assignments and dealing with the quiz, the multiple choice exam set for 30 minutes. You'll have one opportunity to complete this exam. You'll be alerted when you use half your time, and you'll have 5 minutes, 1 minute, 30-second warning. So one of you said 15 and the other one said 25. All right. When you took tests in the past and you had 10 questions, how many minutes did you have in a time exam? How many minutes did you have with 10 questions? Any other guesses? Which one, Kara? Nope. So it's 10. So your 10 minutes for 10 questions. I'm going to let you figure the rest of it out. You should have it by now. So you should already know how many questions there are going to be because it's a 30-minute test. Okay? So anyway, I'm going to leave that alone. And then, of course, your live classroom lecture, you give me that. And then we will go from there. All right, we got about 36 minutes more. So let's get into the lesson content itself. So since we're talking about tonight, crimes against persons, we're going to talk about the crimes that are crimes against people, homicides, voluntary and involuntary manslaughter, justifiable homicide, the difference between battery and simple battery and substantial battery, even though that's usually not used as the term. And then we're going to deal with crimes against persons, dealing with domestic violence, and the degrees of sexual assault crimes. We're going to just touch on those. Okay. So again, we're going to talk about homicide, battery, domestic violence, sexual assault as the lecture, and then we're going to deal with this part here. So what is a homicide? In order to have a homicide, a person must die. There is no such thing as a homicide where the person didn't die. So it has to do with killing someone. And it has to do with killing a person, a human being. And the killing can either be a lawful killing or an unlawful killing. And we're going to talk about most of the time unlawful killings. But just to get you an idea about what we say lawful killings, when a police officer uses deadly force or other to protect someone or protect themselves, is considered as justifiable and lawful. Now, if it's really clear that those were the facts, okay, Let's see. I think I saw something when you say what's not unlawful. You said shaking your head. I don't know what you mean. Elaborate on that. What do you mean? Well, it's like I said. Here's the point. It is lawful as long as they do it to prevent great bodily harm or death to themselves or others. It's lawful. If they go beyond that, even if they, then that case, then it's unlawful. But the homicide is justifiable if they fit within the parameters of this. You read some of the cases, Garner, and we'll talk about some of those kinds of cases. For example, let me give you an example that happened here in Illinois. Young man, you all familiar with um, the 16 shots that were fired by a police officer here in Chicago, Jason Van Dyke? Okay. Now, that police officer argued that they believed that he believed that he was in danger of great bodily harm. Well, first of all, number one, the number of shots that he fired went against that grain. The other thing is the video that came out established clearly that the young man was at a distance away, that he didn't have to fire because he wasn't close to him. If you saw the video, the young man was shaking a little small knife up in the air, and the video spoke for itself. Without the video, there could have been some issues. And so, as a result of that, he was indicted and charged with attempted with murder and excessive force, a use of excessive force case, and came about, and he was found guilty. And so that's what I'm talking about in terms of it. But again, there's a lot of factors that go into situations. Again, the key thing that you as a law enforcement officer have to really understand is that you are doing this in imminent situation of great bodily harm or death to yourself or to protect yourself or others. If I pull a gun on you and it's a toy gun and you shoot me and kill me, is that justifiable or not? Yes or no? What do you think, Kara? Yes. The reason being, it is not my call to determine whether or not that was a real gun or not. Now, let me say this to you with all due respect. Anybody ever seen an orange water gun? You all seen an orange water gun? Okay. All right. If I pull a water gun that's orange on you, do you have the do you think you could shoot me with your weapon because I pulled that weapon and you could see it's an orange water gun? Do you? You think it'll hold up in court? You think, okay. Probably, probably the answer would be no, even in today's society. That's clearly not a gun. However, an argument could be made that who knows if that was a caustic item in the right solution in the gun, which probably would argue again, if I was defense attorney, if it was caustic, it would have damaged the gun because it's plastic. But I'm making a clear case. I'm not saying one that's like a GI Joe or military type, but I'm talking about one that actually is the actual orange water gun. I would probably tend to think that if you shoot me with your gun and kill me because you feared for your life, that probably would end up being an excessive force case. What about if I had one of those guns? You know those water guns that you squirt and you squeeze those, and I pulled that on you. Then would you be justified in taking out your weapon to shoot me? Yeah, the answer is no. And that would be the same scenario with that orange water gun. But again, let's say if it was a gun that you can't tell it was a water gun, it looked like, there's some that are just, they look like guns, but they're water guns. Do you have to take the time to look at the barrel to see if it's just a little hole in there? No, you can then do it. So the key here, guys, is to remember in the scenario that it's going to be something that appears to be a real weapon in the eye of the average normal person in those circumstances situations. Somebody could say, "Well, I was my mind conjured it up as a different looking gun." Um, Try of fact probably won't buy that. So anyway, the bottom line is that it would probably end up being an excessive force case, but I threw that out to you. But yes, in our society, as Brother Presley said, that if you pull a gun, if it's not real and it then turns out to be a water gun, then the person would properly, in terms of killing you in that situation, because it was a toy. I had a person to pull a toy gun on me when I was a police officer, and I didn't shoot him, but I talked him down with the gun. And when I got it, that's when I discovered it was a toy. But from all intents and purposes, from where we were standing, we were only 10 feet apart. It looked like a real gun. But I responded. I told him later, it was God that saved you, young man, because I could have emptied my clip into him. But the bottom line was this, is that I would have had the law on my side in that situation. So we are in an era, like, for example, when I was a kid growing up, we used to play cowboys and Indians. One of those types of guns now being pulled that we played cowboys and Indians, that we had cap pistols, would probably end up causing you to be killed. So anyway, that's that. I just wanted to share that with you to clarify that. So we're not going to spend a whole lot of time when we get to that section. So now let's talk about the different homicides. First degree murder. Now, keep in mind that various jurisdictions have different names, but I'm giving you the general idea of what is considered as first degree murder, or murder in the first degree, or murder period. First, it must satisfy the first requirement. I already said that all homicides causing death of a human being, and premeditated, premeditated and intent to kill that person. Okay, so as stated in first degree murder cases, it must be demonstrated. For example, if it was later determined that the killer had another of his intent to kill the victim and in fact carries out the action, the previous statement could be used to help support the intent, because you discovered that the person had formulated intent before they did it. So if they told somebody, that could be used against them, their statement. Okay. Uh, and then sometimes it's more obvious. So if a person says, "I'm going to kill you, you're going to die," and then fires a shot, then it's clear based upon the statement and the actions immediately after that the person did so. Now, premeditation involves what it says, premeditate, which means you pre-planned it, either just at the instance or either beforehand. So if I decide that I'm going to kill somebody and I start talking about, I don't know, if I went through the steps of getting the weapon, buying a weapon and all of that stuff, and then I kill somebody with the weapon, it is possibly going to be first degree murder. It's possibly going to be first degree murder. But the key thing is premeditation. Before. Pre means before, and meditate means you thought on it. Okay? So that's pretty clear for first degree murder. Now, let's go to the difference between what we call second degree murder. Now, second degree murder in some jurisdictions is called voluntary manslaughter. All right? So it's a lesser degree than murder. Okay? But premeditation doesn't have to be proven. Okay? So just like this jury instruction says that the defendant in Colorado on or about the date charged knowingly caused the death of a person. They committed an act that would cause the death of a person. Note the element of second degree murder doesn't require premeditation or one's mindset, but include the actual intentional act of the other person. Not an accident, but the intentional act. You got to make sure you get that. And so here's what happened with the police officer Van Dyke. They didn't charge him with first degree murder. They charged him with second degree because of the situation. Many excessive force cases generally end up in second degree murder. Generally. Now, they could otherwise, but most would end up in second degree murder. All right? Or voluntary manslaughter. So that's when the killing is done without any prior intent, but occurs in the heat of passion. So that's an argument that a person does. A heat of passion is when a person of ordinary situation doesn't have any more control and they kill someone, such as, for example, walking up on your mate in the bed with another person and you kill them both. That would be an example of second degree murder, because that would be something to incite you. If, for example, someone has done something to you and you end up seeing that person and you kill that person just because you see them, would that be second degree murder, or could it possibly be first degree murder? What do you think? What do you think? Kara says second. What do you think? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But the probable argument, if a good prosecutor does it, it could end up in first degree murder, because you don't like that person and you kill that person. That would be considered as first degree murder, because you probably seethed in that thing and then you killed them. Remember, heat of passion killings, as it says here, applied in murder cases when the murder happens immediately at the moment it caused the impulse. So that if you think about that, that would kick out what I just used as a hypothetical. So it says it would be difficult to lessen the severity of murder under this concept if, for example, and it talks about Bob coming home and finding his wife in bed with Jim, but then hunted Jim down the next day. and killed him. Now you're back at first-degree murder because an act intervened. Okay, got it? Okay, we're going to see. We're going to have some practice tests. Voluntary manslaughter is the intentional or knowing killing of another in a heat of passion. You got to look for the produced by adequate provocation sufficient that a reasonable person would act in an irrational manner. That's what you're going to look at. Look at a person who lost control and killed somebody. Okay, I'm not talking about a mentally disturbed person. All right, so those are the first degree, also called uh, voluntary as opposed to involuntary, which we'll talk about in just a minute. Special circumstances, these circumstances you might run across on the test, by the way. First degree homicide special circumstances. Aggravating factors are most considered in death penalty cases, especially at the time of sentence, when there are two aggravating factors. Future dangerousness, that the person could be violent to society, and the conduct was outrageous, wanton, vile, inhumane, and so forth. That's what we call special circumstances. Okay, if neither of these factors are present in the state of Virginia, first degree murder cases, then the defendant is sentenced to life and not to death. So the key thing, it must be future dangerousness and vileness. In second degree homicide special circumstances, two common circumstances: adequate provocation. This occurs when it exists that the person deprives or person is deprived of self-control. Remember, we're back to what we learned a few minutes ago. So if Bob comes home and finds Jim in bed with his wife, Bob shoots and kills Jim. Bob would likely argue adequate provocation. In these instances, second degree murder would be appropriate in some states. That's what we were talking about a little while ago. All right, so that's a special circumstance. Coercion. The death was because the person was forced. For example, if Jack is taken hostage and the hostage taker has a gun to his head, the hostage taker tells Jack, shoot Bob or I'll kill you. Under special circumstances, Jack shoots Bob. So in that case, then there's special circumstances, which you argue as a defense, people. It's a defense to first degree murder. Okay? So then there's some statutory examples here. Okay? So the point of the matter is that a person is forced. All right? And then various jurisdictions approach it differently. Look for something odd in these exams that will take you into special circumstances, and we're going to do that. Okay, involuntary manslaughter now. Remember, we talked about voluntary. Like, for example, it says when a person is killed and there's utter disregard or utter indifference or reckless act. Utter disregard or utter indifference as a course of action which shows actual or deliberate intention to harm, of which, if not intentional, shows an utter indifference to consciously disregard one's own safety and the safety of others, such as stepping on the gas and driving to impress somebody really fast, and then you kill somebody. Okay, that's an example of that. So notice that in these concepts, where the death has been caused by the action of a person absent the intent to cause death, Proving utter disregard is more challenging because it shows that the actions that caused the death equated to conscious disregard. So the point of the matter is that the person will die. Let's go back up to this. If a person who is driving recklessly and kills a person, he could be prosecuted, or she, for involuntary manslaughter or violating laws, because reckless homicide by intoxication in the drunk driving cases, that's a common way that you see involuntary manslaughter. In these cases, the person didn't intend to kill anybody, but their carelessness or reckless action caused the death. That's the key thing that you're going to look for. It's almost like what we call tort language. If you go to law school, you'll know what torts are. Actually, torts are accidents or not unintended. Okay. Here's another example. Which degree of involuntary manslaughter? Okay. It's 11 p.m. Cold in January. The streets are dry. A male, 23-year-old named James, who's intoxicated, operating a vehicle on a residential road that's 25 miles per hour. But to impress his girlfriend, he impresses her by taking the speed up to 80. Jim drives through the stop sign and collides with another vehicle occupied by a middle-aged couple, and they're killed instantly. Did Jim demonstrate an utter disregard for human life, or were his actions merely reckless? Which one? Which one? Remember, reckless simply means indifferent or careless to the welfare of others. The answer is utter disregard or utter indifference in that situation. Okay. Then this one punch homicide, involuntary manslaughter, can occur in battery cases. And the battery intentionally touching someone that they didn't want to, and the one punch homicide to describe a situation where a person batters that person and then it results in death. Okay, we're going to have some examples of that. All right, and then you can look at these clips. Any questions about homicide before I leave it? All right, so now let's get to battery. And I already kind of talked about battery. It's the intentional act of injuring someone without their consent. That's very simple. And very simple battery is a misdemeanor for which you can go to jail for how long, possibly? How long? Yep, that's it, under a year. If it gets to a year above, it crosses over into felony and then generally heads you toward prison. Sometimes batteries are described in some jurisdictions as assault, but that's a misnomer because here's the difference in reality. Okay, look, I raise my hand to you and you're in fear of me hitting you, that's an assault. Or if I attempt to hit you, but I miss, that's an assault. But if I make contact, it's a battery. A lot of times you hear the term assault and battery. The reason is because that person could tell that it's coming. But if it comes from behind them, it wouldn't necessarily be assault because they can't perceive that they're going to be hit, but it does result in battery. Okay. And so again, assault creates a reasonable belief that harm is about to occur. Involves no physical contact. All right. And it says unless assault is specifically defined otherwise. Forget that. Just remember the difference between the two. Battery is when someone strikes someone and involves actual physical contact. All right. We're not going to get into the issues of bodily harm and all of that when you start to use weapons and things of that nature. Then you get into aggravated battery. So if you introduce something greater, then like intentionally causing bodily harm to another is considered simple battery according to Wisconsin. Physical pain or injury, of impairment or physical condition. Evidence of bodily harm is supported by what the victim reports, that whether or not the person is experiencing pain, and then photographs, injuries, and so forth. Can I ask you a question? And that is, I'm a boxer or either a registered black belt or something of that nature, and I just use my hands to strike you. Would that be considered as battery, or would that be aggravated battery? Yep, because your hands are not ordinary hands. And same thing with a boxer, because your hands are weapons and used. So that's a good call. All right. Mayhem. This is the most serious type of bodily injury where somebody's body is disfigured, or they become permanently disabled, um, uh, cuts or disables the tongue, puts an eye out, slits the nose, so forth. So on. This is mayhem. And what it amounts to is, here's an example of mayhem, and then we can move on. 18-year-old girl, Angela, was at a party with a 21-year-old male, Drake. Both were intoxicated. As the night progressed, Angela and Drake participated in a bizarre ritual that they followed. With Angela's consent and participation, Drake slit her wrist and drank her blood. Sounds gross, but that actually is something that some criminals have done. Uh, then, anybody ever heard of Charles Manson? But anyway, that's a whole nother discussion. Then, to clearly show their commitment to the band, Angela allowed Drake to chop off her pinky with a meat cleaver. Okay, absent her right pinky, Angela eventually became lightheaded and dropped off a local hospital, where, she told emergency room doctors what happened, and they notified police. Did Drake commit mayhem? Did he? You bet it. You bet. He sure did. So batteries occur between complete strangers and even among those who love each other. And that's when we get to domestic violence. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So here we are. So domestic violence, first of all, I don't have to get into it too heavily, involves a relationship where someone is either married, have a child together, or have lived together without being married. And it carries additional penalties. I am in the process of helping rewrite the course on domestic violence that's taught here at the school. So I'm going to be the subject matter expert that works with so if any of you ever take that course, you will see my work in there. And so domestic uh, violence involves a domestic relationship, and it has to be between two adults who have lived together or have a child in common. Okay, that's generally how it operates. If the domestic relationship exists, then the offense of battery would become domestic. Now, there's a lot of issues with this COVID taking place with domestic violence issues because of the fact that people are forced to stay in shelter in place. Well, there are now some movements taking place, and I will probably include this in my research, that individuals are being able to be removed from those situations. However, the problem is that when we, and they're still working on that, is usually the solution is to put that person in a group home. Well, because of the social distancing issue and the requirements to keep people safe and shelter in place, that's a difficult issue, and that's creating a problem. And so what it has done, it has seriously, as I speak today, created a problem for law enforcement to take that person, number one, out of the house, or either to remove those individuals in those domestic situations. Now, it might be that if there is a family member that's close by, I mean, usually a mother or father or sibling, in that case, then that might be able to be done. But that's one of the considerations that is factored now into domestic violence as long as we're in this pandemic. So again, summarizing, uh, two adults at least 18 years of old who've lived together or have a child in common. So if they don't live together and they have a child in common. So what if the person is 17 years old and then they commit the violence? There's going to be a problem depending on what the jurisdiction, each jurisdiction. Um, yep, there you go. You already got my next statement. It's going to depend on the jurisdiction or the state exactly. But for general purposes, we look at across the board. I don't know of any states that have younger than 18. If you do, let me know. But I don't think that anyone has, because they consider you as adult at 18. And then if you've lived together, because there are people living together even younger, as young as 15 and 16 now that are having kids and that kind of situation. So talks about Alaska has expanded the definition of domestic relationship even further. Now, look at what it says here, and include adults or minors who are current or former spouses, lived or have lived together, who are dating or have dated, have engaged in sexual relationship, then they included in that. I think I saw something about Wisconsin. So that might be, and there's a few states that follow that route. Okay, so it depends on the statute. If you take a look at your statute in Wisconsin, you might see that that's the case. But yeah, Alaska, and I'm not surprised that Alaska would have this. Does anybody know why that might be the case for Alaska that you shouldn't be surprised at? It's because of the indigenous population. It's because of the Native American. I don't use the word India, that's an offensive term to people. So Native Americans that are in Alaska, and that's the reason why that is. Okay. All right. So that's all I'm going to say about domestic violence. You can take a look at that on your own because we're already at time and we got just a few more to go. So let's talk about sex assault crimes. It says that common law, rape was the unlawful intercourse by a male and a female other than his wife without her consent. Now it's gender neutral, and you know why. And so sexual assault doesn't require that the intercourse actually takes place, but includes unlawful touching. Though I heard one argument made from a lawyer that a prosecutor that that is actually a form of intercourse. And so anyway, Sexual assault basically involves that, what it says here. However slight, of the private area, the general area of another person. Um, and because sex crimes are so sensitive, a lot of times they aren't reported. And then now we have the um, Rape Shield Act, thank God, that means that now people cannot use the previous um, sexual activity of an individual as a defense to sexual assault or rape. That's a good thing. And then, of course, do we have statutory rape, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. So then there are different degrees of sexual conduct, which I'm not going to spend the time on, that you consider. You can take a look at that. But I want to jump right down to statutory rape, which is a strict liability law. And what that means is you don't have to prove intent. All the law requires is that there was an intent and a mere act of engaging in sexual intercourse with a person who cannot legally consent. Okay? And if it's a person's a minor, even if they lied, I don't care what they look like. I don't care what you thought. You're still guilty of statutory rape. And that varies according to jurisdiction. And then it talks about what I said at the end. Due to the sensitive nature, um, to help address this issue, there's rape shield laws designed to encourage victims to report crimes to law enforcement without fear of their prior sexual relationship. So I remember when I was a lawyer, I didn't do rape cases. I did one where a young lady cried rape when her boyfriend that decided that he wanted to go back with his wife, and the young lady pressed rape charges, and I was his lawyer. And I didn't even do a jury trial. I had a bench trial, and the judge, a black female judge, she saw through what the young lady was doing and acquitted this young man, and then rebuked that young girl for what she was trying to do. Those are the only times. It's hard for me to do those kinds of cases because, number one, my sisters were victims of that with an uncle that you heard me talk about earlier, week one. And then also because of the fact that I have 8 sisters and no brothers. And then also I have 6 daughters and 2 sons. So it would be unfair. So I never did any of those. I'd do a murder case or any of those kinds of things. So those are the crimes that we talk about, crimes against persons. So now, before I give you a key word, I want to go over these key terms because you have a very important exam coming up. So let's spend a few minutes going over this. All right, I know it's going to go longer, but I think you're going to find that it's worth it. So use the flashcards. And then if you have to run Adobe Flash, click on that and then allow it. Once you do it the one time, it's going to help. It's going to be there. So anyway, let's go with these. The willful intimidation, physical assault, battery, sexual assault, or other abusive behavior as part of a systematic pattern of power and control perpetrated by one intimate partner against another. What is that? There you go. That's exactly what it is. When one person kills another, but there is no premeditation or malice or forethought, evil intent, but reckless actions cause to death. What do we call that? Or involuntary manslaughter, right? I mean, I know what you're saying, but yeah, involuntary manslaughter was the term that you're probably going to run across um, in there. But it's the same thing in some jurisdictions, so that's a good call. But remember what they want. So you're beginning to see what they want. Defense that acknowledges that a crime was committed, but offers some justification or excuse to negate the defendant's culpability. What's it called? We talked about it in conjunction with the law enforcement, but it's an affirmative defense. Affirmative defense means you admit you did something, but it's justifiable. And so the one we talked about, we did not talk about a popular affirmative defense. Does anybody know what a popular affirmative defense is that's generally used? And I use it many times as a lawyer. What's one popular affirmative defense? We didn't talk about it. But anybody know? Nope. What's a popular affirmative defense that's used in criminal cases by someone who said they did it, but starts with the word. It's called self-defense. You know that one? Now that it comes back? Yep, I know you would. If you worked in a law firm, I know you knew that one. But yeah, self-defense. You hear it all the time. Self-defense. One of my first cases I won on self-defense. All right. So anyway, I'm going to get out of that. So you can go through and you use that process. Study them all. Go all the way down. Then let's get down to special circumstances. Remember we talked about some of those earlier. So let's start the activity. Jane and Phil have been married for 10 years and they have 2 children together. Jane also has a drinking problem. Jane came home drunk and argued with Phil. Phil threatened to leave Jane and take the children if she didn't get help. Enraged, Jane shot Phil and fled the house with their children. What circumstances would she claim? Who said A? What is yours, Kara? C. Okay, let's see. Let's try yours. That's it. His actions provoked her. It wasn't out of necessity. She didn't have to necessarily do that, but it was adequate provocation would likely be claimed in this case because Jane was so upset with Phil for threatening to take her kids. So that would be a call. I didn't say she would be successful, but that would be what she would argue. Mary and John have been married for 15 years. Mary discovers that John has been having an affair for the past year. They both argue and sleep in separate beds at night. In the middle of the night, still very upset, Mary stabs John once with a knife while he's asleep. John survives, and Mary tells police she couldn't control herself. What special circumstances would she present? Vileness. Any other choices? Okay, let's try vileness. I already know what the answers that's going to come out from that. Nope. Nope. So you'd have that one. You'd have that one wrong there. Let me show you something. I got to do this to do that though. I'll go back to it. I want to show you something that you have to be careful for. Go back to that one. Okay, so we already got that with special circumstances. So what was that one that you got? Jane and Phil were married for 10 years, came home drunk. Phil threatened to leave, take the children. And so which one was that you picked before? Kara? Yep. So then here's the one where you didn't get. So is it future dangerousness? Is it coercion or necessity? Is it violence? How about this one? That's it. Because she was so upset in the heat of passion. You see the difference? She was upset over the affair. Her mind was not there. Last one we're going to do for this one. Jim went for a hike in the wilderness. He got lost. As night fell and the temperature dropped, Jim believed he was going to freeze to death. He broke into a cabin to stay. What circumstances would he claim? Yeah, because otherwise he was going to freeze to death to keep his life going. Okay, so you see how those work. Getting down here. Okay, let's do this, and then we're going to do homicide classifications. This is where you're going to determine degrees and all that stuff. Okay, Frank has a long-standing hatred for Kim. Frank purchased a handgun and hid behind the bushes outside Kim's apartment. When Kim exited, Frank shot and killed her. What is that? That should be easy. Yeah. Yep. John is a gang member who's involved in an ongoing battle for drug sale turf. John tells his other gang members that he's going to kill Jose. A rival gang member. John leaves armed with a gun and kills Jose. What homicide would be? Okay. Why? What made him, what nailed him? Something that I said earlier. Yep. There we go. His mouth. First degree murder because John's action displays intent to commit the murder and then he intentionally carried it out. And that's telling him. Last one for this one. Jackson and two friends are hanging out on the top floor of a parking ramp. Jackson, who has a violent history, targets another man, Rick, and tells his friends, watch this, I'm gonna kill that guy. Jackson punches Rick in the face, picks him up, throws him over the ledge. Rick falls to his death. What homicide classification? That's right. So he said he was going to kill the person. Remember his mouth again, and then he intentionally punched him. We'll do one more of these, and then we'll switch to. Okay, here we go. Mike is drag racing against Matt in a highly populated entertainment district. Mike drives through a red light at a high rate of speed, collides with another motorist, killing the driver. What homicide classification? Yep, there we go. Mike didn't display any premeditation, but his reckless driving caused it. Okay. Excuse me. So now the last ones are the ones that are just going to be, a few of these are actually in the quiz. I always told somebody it was a misnomer to call it a quiz that you take actually in week 3 and 6. Should have called it midterm. But anyway, the intent to cause death with premeditation is considered what type of murder? As soon as you see that word there, it gives it away. Yep. A father comes home to find his daughter's 17-year-old boyfriend that he don't like about to have consensual intercourse with his 17-year-old daughter. Outraged and out of control, the father kills the boyfriend. The father is likely to claim what? What's the father gonna claim? Which one? Nobody wants to hit it? Yep, because he lost self-control. John, 18-year-old, that's, see, y'all hesitate. Boom, you got to hit him. Bam. That's the same way you're going to have to do with this test. Uh, John, 18 years old, and Jack, 19, decided to drag race on a busy roadway. During the illegal act of racing on the highway, John drove through a red light at a high rate of speed and killed another motorist. The most likely criminal charge that John will face is what? You already know. What is it? Nope. You got caught trapped. What's the answer? You know. What is it? Now you know. Yeah, it is. That's the first one. But you got caught because you're thinking too heavily. Okay. Finally, Jim intentionally punches Mike in the face during a bar fight. Mike sustains minor injury beneath his right eye, which doesn't require. What charge should you recommend for Jim? Yeah, anybody who do domestic battery, they don't get it at all. It's not substantial because they made sure they let you know, and it's not mayhem, so it leaves only one. Yeah, and a misdemeanor. I feel like one more, and that's it. Then we'll call it a day. Here we go. This is a good one here to end on. Two adults, Eric and Jessica, have been living together for the past year and have one child in common. One night, Eric comes home drunk, begins to argue with Jessica about their relationship. During the argument, Eric slaps Jessica on her face, causing a red mark. Jessica reports to the police that the injury caused her pain. What is the appropriate charge? Okay. Yep. Yep. Because it's a minor injury. So anyway, those are the things that you're going to be looking out for when you take this particular test. So, what do you think is the key phrase for this week? And it's probably not going. You're not going to get it. Okay. Any other guesses? I didn't think anybody would get it, but Kara got it. It's homicide. I thought you were going to think that, okay, because last week he picked crimes against property or property crimes, that I might pick crimes against persons or something. Nah, but it's homicide. Definitely it. Very good, Kara. I don't know. You've been in, how many classes of mine you've been in before? Was this the second one? Three. Okay. Uh-huh. Yep. And Presley, how many classes you been in mine? I know at least one. How many? You've been in two. See, so Kara got one up on you. So okay. Yeah, it's homicide. All right, guys. So give me that. And again, I remind you, remember this exam that you're taking will include weeks 1, 2, and 3, the materials. And I told you one of the best ways is go back and do what we just did a few minutes ago. And I guarantee you that you'll do fine. Okay. So, by the way, did anybody figure out how many questions there are in on the exam? Okay. All right. You're right. I'll have to say that. Yeah. Generally, you should be aware. Just let me tell you something about Rasmussen that you should be aware of. Generally, when you take quizzes, and I'm not talking about the same thing when you take final exams where you have to fill in the blank. But when they're generally multiple choices, it's generally 1 minute a question. So there's your answer. So yep, you got it. All right, guys, I'm going to say good night to you. Um, enjoy this week. Stay safe. I just finished up my interesting course on COVID-19 and dealt with some very interesting issues in terms of criminal law, dealing with corrections and the whole employment situation. Very interesting course. So I'm prime time when it comes to that. So I'm going to say good night. See you next week.